right within my margin of error. This is so dope. Back to you, Murphy.
Well, someone's found his inner Kornacki. Thank you, Pat.
Wow. A shout out there to Steve Kornacki and the big board skills on last night's episode of Murphy Brown. And we are blessed by the presence of the real Kornacki in our studio right now. National political correspondent for NBC News and MSNBC and the author of The Red and the Blue. Is that the first you've seen that?
I was seeing stuff on Twitter last night. I didn't actually see the clip. That's quite
You've achieved household name status, my friend.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Okay. Last name only.
You and your big board.
Last name only.
Board, you know?
Joe?
Boy, that's huge, Willie. You and me, we continue to just put on the helmets every day with the lights on, go down into the mines and get no recognition, but
we're not in it for that.
No, we're not. It's we're in it for the love of the game, I guess. But Kornacki, he's a superstar now. So let's talk, Mr. Hotshot, about let's talk about some of the polls. Why don't we start, Steve, actually, with the most interesting? I think the one that most people would say predicts how this is going to turn out next week better than anything else. There's another poll out that shows Donald Trump's approval ratings dipping down into the low 40s after he was experiencing 45, 46, 47% last week. The latest NPR PBS Marist poll has his approval rating down to 41, his disapproval 52%. Gallup heading back down to 40, dropping 4 or 5 points from the previous week. This, at the end of the day, is what you and Republicans and Democrats are probably looking at the most closely, isn't it, as far as just how big a wave might be?
Yeah, no, and we've been saying there's a big difference between Trump going into Election Day in the mid-40s versus the low 40s, or certainly when you get down into the 30s. I would say the average this morning, if you average every poll that's out there together, they've been doing sort of a daily trend line with that. It's sitting this morning at 43.9 still. A week ago today, it was 44.7. 44.7 a week ago was basically the high watermark of the Trump presidency. You got to go back to the early weeks to find him matching that number. That was a week ago. It's come down essentially a point in a week. I suspect we're going to get a batch of new polls. A lot of media organizations in the closing weekend before the midterm traditionally come out with them. So I think I suspect we're going to get a couple in the next few days that are really going to kind of set that number and give us a sense where it really is heading into Election Day.
Right, and if it continues that trend, obviously, we can expect it to be 40 or some maybe even in the high 30s. Let's go to Texas. I wanted to tell my conservative friends a week ago who were mocking Beto O'Rourke for getting wiped out against Ted Cruz that they were sounding just like Democrats who were mocking Republicans for suggesting Donald Trump could win in 2016. Again, this is a big uphill climb, and this is only one race, but reason to believe that that O'Rourke actually is getting much closer to Ted Cruz and Ted Cruz or the Republican Party would like.
Yeah, I mean, in what you're seeing on the screen there, that is a good poll for Beto O'Rourke, but I mean, got to say, he's still behind in that poll, and we've had. I got to say, there have been more polls out of Texas than any other state we've seen this cycle. I feel every hour I'm looking up and seeing a new one out of Texas, and still the patterns persisted. It's a bit of a parallel, I think you can almost draw between what we've seen in the Texas Senate race and the Florida governor's race, where in the Florida governor's race, the Republicans not out of it, DeSantis by any stretch of the imagination, but every poll I have seen has had Andrew Gillum leading the Florida governor's race, and every poll I've seen since early on in September has shown Ted Cruz leading the Texas Senate race. It's close enough in each situation where if there's a turnout shift, if there's more energy on one side than we thought, if there's less energy on one side than we thought on Election Day, there could be a surprise. But the totality of the polling we've been seeing out of Texas still suggests, Cruz's lead there somewhere, I would say, in the mid-single digits, probably closer than it should be for a Republican, but still does look like a lead heading into Election Day for him.
But again, you have trend lines, Willie, that appear to be breaking in the Democrats' direction in a lot of these races. Again, we talked about Indiana yesterday, 7 points. That may be an outlier. We just have to wait and see. But, Steve brought up Florida. We've got 2 or 3 polls out of the Florida Senate race that it's just like Texas has shown Ted Cruz ahead by number of points. Every poll that we've seen lately has shown Bill Nelson ahead of Rick Scott.
Yeah, Steve, look at this here. This is a CNN poll. This is a margin of error race. If you look at that poll, Nelson up 2 points on Governor Rick Scott for the U.S. Senate seat there in Florida. There's a St. Pete poll as well right here. Same spread, 2 points for Bill Nelson over Governor Rick Scott there. This feels to me like a toss-up. What does it look like to you?
Yeah, and it does. It seems, I think the most encouraging thing for Democrats is there was a sense in Florida that after the hurricane down there, just given the handling of the natural disaster in Florida by the governor, by Rick Scott, that there might be a political boost for him from that. There was polling that showed his 3-to-1 margin of Floridians approving of how he handled that. And sometimes you just see in politics, the famous example is Chris Christie in New Jersey a number of years ago. But when a state goes through a natural disaster, you'll see a bounce for a governor. I think for Democrats looking at this polling, you're not really seeing evidence there that this has changed the equation in Scott's favor. You know, the other thing is just the nature of midterm years. When you're the opposition party candidate in a midterm election year, it's a good place to be. It's one thing when you're, Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota and Trump won your state by 36 points. That's a lot of political gravity to overcome. But when you're Bill Nelson in Florida, Trump won your state by 2 points. So this is the scale here. They're both red states on paper, but this is obviously not nearly as red state as some of these other Democrats are sort of in. And so I think the midterm climate does give him a little bit of an advantage there, too. Look
at another fascinating race in the Southeast. The latest poll has the race for Georgia governor separated by 0.2 of a percentage point. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution Channel 2 Action News poll puts Stacey Abrams at 46.9% and Brian Kemp at 46.7%, with 5% undecided, and Libertarian Ted Metz polling under 2%. Former President Barack Obama set to campaign for Stacey Abrams today in Georgia, and yesterday Abrams had Oprah, who didn't just appear at a campaign event, she actually knocked on doors urging people to vote.
Oh my God! Hi, Denise.
Hi, Oprah.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, surprise. I am shocked.
Surprise. So I'm canvassing for Stacey Abrams.
Yes.
Are you voting for her? For anybody here who has an ancestor who didn't have the right to vote, and you are choosing not to vote wherever you are in this state, in this country, you are dishonoring your family. You are disrespecting and disregarding their legacy, their suffering and their dreams when you don't vote. So honor your legacy. Honor your legacy. Honor your right to citizenship in this, which is the greatest country in the world.
Stacey Abrams being bankrolled by Hollywood liberals, sending their support into the state, and some of them come into the state. Like I heard Oprah is in town today. And I heard Will Ferrell was going door to door the other day. Well, I'd like to remind Stacey and Oprah and Will Ferrell, I'm kind of a big deal too.
Long wind up for Mike Pence to hit that Anchorman line, but he hit it by the end.
Boy, that was a long, whirly bird wind up.
It really was. Louis Tiant up there. So Gene Robinson, the guns don't get much bigger in the Democratic Party than Oprah Winfrey and obviously President Obama going in today for Stacey Abrams. How does this race shake out? Does she make history as the first female African-American governor in the history of this country?
Well, my friend Dan Rather would say it's tight as a tick. It's right there. It's tied at 47%. I believe in Georgia you have to get 50% too,
right? There'll be a runoff in December.
There's a runoff. That's a possible outcome. If you look at those numbers, it looks like a likely outcome. But I'm watching, the key demographic to me in this race is African-American women. African-American women elected Doug Jones in Alabama next door in the special election, voting in numbers greater than their weight in the population. About 14% of the Alabama voting population, I think, and they were 17% of the electorate. African-American women, who are a bigger share of the electorate in Georgia, if they vote in larger than expected numbers, and there's some indications that they might, that's very, very good for Stacey Abrams, and she could pull off what would be a monumental milestone victory.
You know, every year when we have these wave elections, Steve Kornacki, there are a couple of real shocks, especially in the House. Nobody saw coming. In 1994, George Nethercutt beat Tom Foley, then the Speaker of the House. And it's happened time and again. But a couple races we've been talking about this week. Steve King in Western Iowa. Nobody believed that Steve King would have a competitive race this year. Never had. No reason to believe he would this year. But also a poll that just came out yesterday really surprises me. The Alaska at-large race. Don Young, that guy's a chairman. He had been there forever when I first came in about 25 years ago. And you actually have, in the state of Alaska, about as red as it has gotten over the past 50 years in the state of Alaska, you have Galvin ahead of Don Young in a poll with less than a week to go. That in and of itself is shocking.
Don Young is you've been around for a long time, a cantankerous character, I think it's fair to say. He had a close call about 10 years ago. Folks wrote him off. I think it was in 2008. He had a close call, survived then. There is sort of this legend that's built up around Don Young politically in Alaska that he will always find his way out of a jam. This is the biggest jam he's been in some time. In that same poll you just put up on the screen, his unfavorable rating. I mean, he's a polarizing figure in Alaska. His unfavorable rating in that poll sits at 44%. Galvin, the Democrat, running against him, I think her unfavorable number is sitting at around 20. So she's not as well defined, but she's not nearly as polarizing. And also keep in mind, in Alaska, it's not just this at-large House race. They've had a wild situation in the governor's race there where the independent governor backed out of the race in the middle of the campaign. Mark Begich, there's a name some people might know, running for governor on the Democratic side. You've got a close race for governor there. You know, Alaska is one of those states. It is deep red. It is a very conservative state, but it's also it's a very independent state. It was willing to elect an independent governor 4 years ago. It's done that a couple times before, and so that might be a factor here as well.
Joe, I want to just talk about the Oprah brand for a second. And the Democrats, thank God, have been smart and have not put out celebrities in Hollywood. And Oprah is not Hollywood. Oprah is in a very different place in our culture. She almost like Muhammad Ali did. She is at such a different level. And I would ask our viewers, go to YouTube or wherever, if you watch her speech, it's who we are. She so articulates what this country is about, what's at stake. She tells a story about a pastor's father who walked 6 miles to one school years ago, was denied to vote, 6 miles to another, then finally 6 miles, and they said it's too late. And you vote because with him in his mind. And I was moved. Just go, and you're reminded who we are. And I hope that between now and Tuesday, she is the only person we see out there. Please, celebrities, stay home.
Well, for those of us, yes, amen. Celebrities stay home. Oprah, you go wherever you want to go. We'll remember back, Willie, during the campaign, I think it was late 2015, Barack Obama was having a little bit of trouble gaining traction. And Oprah went down, had a massive rally for him in South Carolina. I'm not going to say that was the turning point, but that was definitely one of those markers where Oprah Winfrey actually, and that rally helped Barack Obama in ways that I think stayed with him through the first couple of contests.
Here's how you know how powerful Oprah is. Donald Trump was throwing a softball about Oprah Winfrey last night. He said, I love Oprah. I was on her last week of her show. I love Oprah. I think she's great. That's a moment of sanity. That's how you know how powerful Oprah is.
Well, that's actually kind of impressive that he was on the last week of Oprah's show.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's a whole other story, no question. Household names.
Willie,
yes.
Willie, that's kind of like what fight doctor Freddie Pacheco said about Riddick Bowe during the Olympics. Riddick had spasms of lucidity. That was for the President of the United States. That was a spasm of lucidity when he goes, Oprah, wait, no, can't talk badly about her. That's pretty impressive. That's the one thing that he could cling hold to.
He kept it together in that moment, for sure. Steve Kornacki is a household name. Did you know also, Joe, the #1 costume this year for Halloween in America? Steve Kornacki. They did
of course.
The polling just came in, the exit polling. Steve, good to see you.
Wardrobe isn't tough to replicate.
Get the khakis and the running shoes, and you're all set.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.